Every year, the headlines say the same thing. NHS staff awarded X% pay rise. To the majority of the UK population, this probably seems like the money is pouring in. But if you work in the NHS, your bank account often tells a very different story. The payslip arrives, the number is barely higher, and somehow it doesn't feel like a real pay rise. So, what's going on? And why does it feel like we're simply going backwards? In this video, I'll explain all of the real reasons that NHS pay rises often don't feel like pay rises at all. From inflation and tax to pension contributions, national insurance, workload changes, and hidden threshold effects. By the end, you'll understand exactly where the money goes and why everyone is getting so fed up. Now, before we begin, I would humbly ask that if you haven't already subscribed, then please consider doing so now. These videos really seem to be helping a lot of our community, but the only way that we can grow is together. With that being said, sit back, relax, and let's take a deeper dive into the data. So let's start by looking at the big problem that affects all UK workers: inflation. Inflation is essentially the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises over time, which reduces the purchasing power of money. In simple terms, it means that over time, each pound buys less than it did before. Now, the best way of visualizing how much more expensive life is now is by looking at the Consumer Prices Index, including owner-occupiers' housing costs, also known as CPIH. This measures inflation in the UK by tracking changes in the prices of goods and services over time, including the costs associated with owner-occupied housing. On screen, you'll see how the prices have risen over time, and remember that each year is a separate increase, so the effect compounds over time. If we then compare this to NHS wages over time, you'll see that the alleged pay rises are simply slowing down the rate at which the ship sinks, not stopping it. For example, if inflation is 4% and your pay rises by 3%, you haven't gained 3%. You've lost 1% in real terms. And even when pay rises match inflation, this only maintains your purchasing power. So a pay rise that looks good on paper can disappear in real life. That's the first psychological hit. Now, the next financial killer is frozen tax thresholds. In the UK, you pay income tax as a percentage of your earnings based on how much you earn. However, these tax thresholds have been frozen for several years, which means the personal allowance stays the same, the 20% threshold stays the same, and so on. So while your pay is rising, more is pushed into taxable range, which means you lose more to the government, even if your job hasn't changed. This is called fiscal drag. For example, if you earn close to the higher rate threshold and your pay increases by a few £1,000s, you may suddenly find part of your pay taxed at 40% instead of 20%. So that 5% pay rise might only feel like 2 to 3% in your take-home pay. You didn't move up in seniority, but the tax system quietly took a bigger slice. It's also worth noting here that when your salary rises, your NI contributions rise too. National insurance is calculated as a percentage of earnings above certain thresholds, so this is more money that will be lost during a pay rise. Now, this is a huge one for NHS staff: NHS Pension contributions. For as brilliant as the pension is, there are some downsides that come with it. It's important to recognise that the contributions are tiered, and staff can pay anywhere from 5.2% to 12.5% depending on their income, which is a huge number of deductions. This means that as your salary rises, you may move into a higher contribution band, and thus your employee contribution percentage increases. So you don't just pay more because you earn more. You might pay a higher percentage as well. For example, if you get a pay rise and go from contributing 9.8% to 10.7%, then that increase alone can swallow a chunk of your pay rise. And because pension contributions come out before tax, they change the structure of your deductions in ways many people don't immediately see. Let's keep going. What else do you lose? Well, if you have a student loan, a pay rise increases your repayments automatically. Student loans are calculated as a percentage of income above a threshold. So, a higher salary equals a higher repayment, which leads to a lower take-home impact. It's simply another silent deduction that scales with income. The other consideration is that many NHS staff are affected by benefit tapering. For example, child benefit high income charge, tax-free childcare thresholds, and universal credit taper rates. This means a small pay rise can reduce child benefits, tax credit entitlements, and other means-tested support. So in some households, the effective gain from the pay rise can just take away from other areas of life. There's also confusion between two different things: annual pay awards and incremental pay progression. If you move up a pay step within your band, that can look like a big pay rise. But that isn't a government pay award. It's simply part of your contractual progression. And once you reach the top of your band, those incremental jumps stop. After that, any pay rises that you get in that role are purely cost of living adjustments, and those tend to feel much smaller. It may sound unusual, but many staff don't realise that their early career jumps were progression, not national pay rises. So later, increases feel disappointing in comparison. With all of that being said, let's take a simplified example and show what a pay rise actually looks like in the NHS. Let's say an NHS employee earns a wage of £27,750. This is around the bottom of band 4. They receive an incredible 10% pay rise, bringing their new pay to around £30,600. Now before we continue, please let me add that even in our wildest dreams, we would never receive this kind of pay rise from the government, but it makes it easy to visualize for the sake of this example. So to continue, the employee has gained a 10% pay rise. Now let's start the deductions. Tax, NI, student loan and pension, which is now in the slightly higher threshold of 8.3%. At the end of all of this, they are left with an additional take-home pay of £1,055 a year, which is about £88 per month. Let me repeat that. 10% pay rise for £88 a month. We should also consider that this is only in the 20% income tax range and does not account for inflation. For example, if the cost of food, household bills, fuel, childcare, etc. has risen by £25 a month, then actually this incredible and unrealistic 10% pay rise is leaving you with an extra £63 a month. For reference, this is possibly enough for a single Domino's takeaway for you and your family, though please note that a typical combo deal for 4 pizzas and 3 sides is about £70. There's also a psychological factor involved with jobs in the NHS that often get forgotten about, and this is harder to quantify. While pay rises are welcomed and a person's specific role may not have changed, staff are becoming increasingly overburdened with workload. Stress increases, number of patients and responsibilities increase, and public expectation changes. There are very few other UK jobs that get more criticism, and yet the health service is relied on so heavily that people would be lost without it. The only reason I mention this is because if workload has increased significantly, but pay only increases modestly, if at all, it can feel disconnected from the effort. So many staff work tirelessly with great responsibility and continue to adapt to increasing pressure while suffering criticism and abuse that no other job would reasonably get. Ultimately, it's just another reason that the pay rises don't feel like they make any difference. So why don't NHS pay rises feel like pay rises? Because inflation erodes purchasing power. Tax thresholds are frozen. National insurance scales up. Pension contributions increase. Student loans rise. Benefits taper. And psychology magnifies the difference. The system is layered. And once you understand the layers, your payslip makes a lot more sense. When signing up to join the NHS, we are all aware that it's not about the money. It's about making a difference and helping others, which staff do day in, day out. Unfortunately, being a good person doesn't pay the bills, and as much as money is not the reason for the job, it should always be considered. I hope that this video has offered some clarity on why pay rises feel like they do, and made you aware that you are not alone in feeling underwhelmed by the direction in which the service is heading. If you are one of the many that feel this way, then please subscribe and join this growing community so we can help more NHS staff come together. Thank you for watching. If you found this video useful, then feel free to check out some of our other videos. Please hit the like button below on the way out and subscribe for more simple finance videos covering pay, pensions, tax, and long-term wealth. I hope we cross paths again, and I wish you all the best for your future.